Something big just happened in Washington. Senator Tim Kaine just accused Donald Trump of waging a war on clean energy that could set America's energy independence back years. This isn't just politics. It's about who controls the future of power, technology, and global influence.
Chair, and thanks to our witnesses. I wish Senator Sullivan was still here. Just one comment about his concluding remarks that Democrats have been blocking permitting reform for decades. I think Democrats have been working hand in hand with Republicans on permitting reform issues. My understanding from Democrats on the relevant committees were that those issues were closing, and there was a real possibility of finding a path forward that was bipartisan. But President Trump's decision to wage war on clean energy, especially a concerted effort to wage war against offshore wind projects, which have been repeatedly rebuffed in courts, but that has not stopped the president from attacking offshore wind, has caused the permitting reform efforts to grind to a halt. It seems to me in this area of critical minerals or energy self-sufficiency, if we're going to be all of the above, we should be all of the above and not just all of the below oil, gas, and coal. My state has been affected dramatically by President Trump's actions. We want permitting reform, but we don't want permitting reform that takes clean American domestic energy off the table. To my witnesses, thank you so much for being here today and for your work and for your testimony. I was in Australia last week for a visit connected to AUKUS and appreciate some of the testimony earlier about AUKUS Pillar 1. Australia produces about half of the world's lithium, but historically has relied on China for refining. What specific steps is the DoD taking to ensure Australia refining and separation capacity scales fast enough to reduce reliance on Chinese processing? And this question builds upon a positive meeting that the President and the Australian Prime Minister had in October, where they announced a bilateral partnership to escalate Australian critical mineral production and refining.
Thank you, Senator. We're excited to be partnered with our Australian colleagues. We've invested in Alcoa in a partnership with the Japanese as well in Australia recently. Lithium is not something that we're terribly focused on within the DOW. It is not on our critical list. There's too many problems, and so we've decided that we need to make some choices. That is something we believe we have adequate supply from global sources, from domestic production, from our partners and allies, that for the moment, the DOW itself does not require as much focus on it. So we've prioritized other minerals, yttrium, germanium, gallium.
Let me build on that, appreciating the comment you made about lithium, but the general issue of refining capacity is an important one. It's not just where are the critical minerals, how can we extract them and get them to market. China has sort of locked up a lot of the world's refining capacity. So in developing a critical mineral strategy that we can rely on with a supply chain that we can rely on, what is the DoD doing to focus on the refining issue as a component of those minerals that you're concerned with?
Absolutely, Senator. It's a major priority for us. We're working across, again, the value chain to make sure that for all of the critical elements that the DOW has identified, that we are investing adequately in each element to include mining, production, refining, and recycling in an adequate way. And I'll turn it over to Jeff for any specific comments on refining.
Yes, thank you, sir. Senator, Australia is a fantastic partner and ally on multiple fronts, but especially when it comes to minerals, just given what their country is blessed with and what is in the ground. From a processing standpoint, we look for opportunities with all partners and allies to build a domestic capability through the Defense Production Act. Australia is actually considered a domestic source, and so we are working on a number of different fronts. As Honorable Kadanazi mentioned, on Alcoa of Australia, that is a trilateral investment with Australia and Japan. But we have other open opportunities. Just 2 weeks ago, we held a defense industrial base consortium call for submissions of papers and proposals from industry across the world. That includes Australia, and it's at all stages of production. And we welcome any participation, any cooperation, any collaboration that directly aligns with the President's agreement signed with Australia last year.
Well, one last question back to lithium. A few weeks ago, the DoD announced that 25 vendors had been invited to compete in phase 1 of a drone dominance program. Lithium-ion batteries are a critical enabling technology for drones, but China does control much of the upstream supply chain for processing battery materials. What are the requirements for the drone dominance vendors to source battery or other materials from the U.S. or allied suppliers?
Thank you, Senator. The batteries issue is a critical one, not just for drones, but for the entire supply chain for the Department of War. So minerals that go into those batteries are available, we think, for lithium, more or less. There's challenges associated with some of the alternatives. So there are alternative chemistries for batteries. We have a large team that works within industrial-based policy on batteries issues. We convened a whole-of-government effort 3 weeks ago, to go ahead and look at batteries opportunities and the threat from China's control of markets on batteries. So we're working with our colleagues to go ahead and identify alternative sources and chemistries, and then to work with the teams that are driving drone adoption to identify the right mix of controls on access to battery raw materials and technologies going forward.
Senator Kelly.
What Senator Tim Kaine just said during that hearing reveals something that many Americans may not realize. The debate over energy in the United States is no longer simply about oil versus wind or coal versus solar. It has become a strategic battle over economic leadership, national security, and whether the United States will lead the next generation of global energy technology or fall behind while other countries move ahead. Kaine's criticism focused on what he described as a deliberate effort by Donald Trump to undermine clean energy development, particularly offshore wind. Now, on the surface, this might sound like just another partisan dispute in Washington. But if you listen closely to what Kaine is arguing, he's raising a deeper concern about how energy policy decisions today shape the country's power and influence for decades to come. Energy independence has always been a powerful idea in American politics. For years, the discussion centered around producing more oil and gas domestically so the country would not rely on foreign supplies. But the global energy landscape has changed dramatically. Today, energy independence also depends on who leads in renewable power, who controls the supply chains for batteries, and who dominates the refining of critical minerals that power modern technology. This is exactly where Kaine shifted the conversation during the hearing. He pointed out that countries like Australia produce huge amounts of lithium, one of the most important materials used in modern battery technology. But much of the world's refining capacity is controlled by China. That means even when raw materials come from allied nations, the processing and manufacturing can still run through Chinese supply chains.